have a very, very tender spot for this movie. It's very hard to look like you're having a fun time when you're like,
Picture this. It's 1987, the summer is winding down, and a small low-budget film quietly slips into theaters with almost zero fanfare. The studio that released it was so convinced it would fail that they planned to pull it from cinemas after a single weekend and dump it straight onto home video. The producers had been rejected over 40 times trying to get the script made. A major marketing partner had already walked away. And one prominent producer, after sitting through a screening, reportedly told the filmmakers they should burn the negatives and collect the insurance money rather than release it at all. That film was Dirty Dancing. And yet, something extraordinary happened. Audiences walked in, and they did not walk back out the same. They fell in love, with the music, with the movement, with the story, and most of all, with two leads whose chemistry lit up the screen in a way that nobody, not even the people who made the film, had fully anticipated. Dirty Dancing went on to gross over $214 million worldwide on a budget of just $6 million. It won an Academy Award for Best Original Song. It turned Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey into permanent icons of popular culture. And nearly 4 decades later, it still has people talking, rewatching, and feeling things they struggle to put into words. But here is what makes this story even more fascinating. So much of what you love about that movie almost never made it to the screen. Scenes that became legendary were never planned. Moments of pure, electric chemistry were caught on camera entirely by accident. The two stars who made the whole thing work reportedly could not stand each other when they started. And the conditions under which the film was made were so grueling, so physically demanding, and at times so dangerous, that it is something of a miracle the movie was completed at all. Today, we are pulling back the curtain. We are going behind the velvet ropes, past the lake, and straight into the messy, miraculous, utterly compelling story of what really happened during the making of Dirty Dancing. Buckle up, because some of this you will absolutely not believe. Let's start at the very beginning, because even the name of this film was a battlefield. When screenwriter Eleanor Bergstein first conceived the project, she drew deeply from her own personal history. The dancing, the summer resort setting, the coming-of-age emotional terrain, all of it was rooted in real experiences from her own life. She had a clear, passionate vision for what the film should be, and she fought for it at every turn. But one of the earliest and most unexpected fights was over something that might seem trivial at first glance: what to call the thing. The title, Dirty Dancing, caused an immediate and surprisingly serious problem. In the late 1980s, anything that carried even a whiff of sexual suggestion could trigger intense scrutiny from censorship bodies and conservative audiences. When the film's early materials began circulating, officials at the Canadian border reportedly held up the dailies, the raw, unedited footage shot each day on set, because they genuinely believed, based on the title alone, that they were dealing with an adult film. An X-rated production. Not a romantic drama about a young woman finding her voice at a summer resort, but something far more explicit. That kind of confusion at the border level tells you everything you need to know about the climate in which this film was being made. And here is something that might genuinely surprise you. Patrick Swayze, the man who became synonymous with the film and whose face is essentially the face of Dirty Dancing in the collective cultural memory, despised the title. He made no secret of it either. In a 1987 interview, he openly admitted that he hated the name and had actively pushed for it to be changed. He felt it was misleading, reductive, and did not honor the emotional depth of the story. For a man who took his craft extremely seriously and had trained rigorously as a dancer and actor, having the project reduced to a provocative 2-word phrase felt like a disservice. The alternative title that was on the table? I Was a Teenage Mambo Queen. We will let that sink in for a moment. So perhaps, on reflection, Dirty Dancing was not so bad after all. The studio held firm, the title stayed, and the rest is history. But it is a remarkable thing to consider. The film's own lead actor went into production already at odds with one of its most fundamental elements. That tension, it turns out, would be a theme throughout the entire filmmaking experience. Here is another layer of the Dirty Dancing story that does not get nearly enough attention. The film you know and love very nearly starred entirely different people. The role of Johnny Castle, the brooding, magnetic dance instructor at the heart of the story, was coveted by a remarkable range of actors. Names that were seriously considered or auditioned for the part include Billy Zane, Benicio del Toro, and Val Kilmer. Think about that for a moment. Any one of those actors in that role would have produced an entirely different film, different in feel, different in energy, different in cultural impact. It is almost impossible to imagine, which tells you how perfectly Patrick ultimately fit the part, but the road to his casting was anything but smooth. In fact, the situation was more dramatic than most people realize. When filming actually began, it was Billy Zane who was set to play Johnny. He had been cast. The role was his. But as cameras rolled and scenes were filmed, the producers and director noticed something that no amount of screen tests could fully predict. There was simply no chemistry between Zane and Jennifer Grey. The spark that the story demanded be. That electricity between the two leads that the entire film's emotional logic depended upon was not there. And so, a decision was made. Zane was let go, and Patrick was brought in. Director Emile Ardolino had also been insistent from the start that he wanted real dancers who could act, not actors who would require dance doubles or stand-ins. This conviction narrowed the field considerably, and it ultimately worked in Patrick's favor, given his extensive background training at the Harkness and Joffrey ballet schools. He was one of the rare performers who genuinely could do it all. On the other side of the equation, Jennifer Grey's casting was far from a foregone conclusion either. Actresses including Sarah Jessica Parker and Winona Ryder auditioned for the role of Baby. Jennifer ultimately won the part, but she came into the project with significant anxieties. Unlike Patrick, she was not a trained dancer, and the prospect of performing alongside someone with his level of skill and fearlessness was genuinely terrifying to her. She later spoke openly about this in interviews, describing their dynamic as a kind of marriage of opposites. His fearlessness combined with her fearfulness, his boldness paired with her caution. She was paid $50,000 for the role, a modest figure that in retrospect seems almost absurd given what the film became. What is particularly interesting is that this was not the first time the two had worked together. They had shared the screen 3 years earlier in the 1984 film Red Dawn. And by most accounts, the experience had not left them as great friends. There was friction between them, rooted in their deeply different approaches to their work and their personalities. Producers were actually hesitant to pair them again for exactly this reason. It is one of cinema's great ironies that the two people nobody was sure should work together ended up creating one of the most beloved on-screen partnerships in film history. Now we get to the heart of it. The moments that audiences have re-watched hundreds of times, the scenes that have been quoted, imitated, and celebrated for nearly 4 decades, some of the most iconic of them were never written into the script. They were accidents. Happy, extraordinary, entirely unplanned accidents. Take the rehearsal montage. You know the one. Johnny and Baby are practicing the mambo, working through the choreography, and Johnny trails his fingers slowly down Baby's arm as part of the movement. And Baby, that is, Jennifer, completely loses it. She dissolves into helpless giggles, unable to keep a straight face, while Johnny, that is, Patrick, visibly grows more and more frustrated. It is charming, it is funny, and it feels completely real. Because it was completely real. Jennifer Grey is genuinely ticklish. When Patrick's fingers moved down her arm, her laughter was not performed, it was instinctive and uncontrollable. And Patrick's irritation in response was not acting either. He was genuinely frustrated. He was a professional, he was in pain from his knee injury, he was operating under an intense filming schedule, and his co-star could not stop laughing every time they tried to get through the sequence. What makes the story even more remarkable is what happened next. According to producer Linda Gottlieb, nobody even remembered that this footage existed. They had eventually managed to film the scene without the giggles, and that was the version everyone assumed would be used. It was only when the film's dance editor was going through all the raw footage in the editing room that the giggling take was rediscovered. When the team watched it back, they burst out laughing. When they showed it to Jennifer and Patrick, the two of them laughed as well, genuinely astonished, because they had both completely forgotten it had happened. The decision was made to use that take instead of the polished, controlled version, and what you see in the film is pure, unscripted spontaneity. Then there is the sequence set to Mickey and Sylvia's Love is Strange, where Johnny and Baby dance together with a kind of playful, intimate ease that feels unlike anything else in the film. That scene was also unscripted. The cameras were rolling during what was supposed to be a simple rehearsal, and neither Patrick nor Jennifer was aware they were being filmed. What was captured was their genuine, unguarded dynamic during a moment when they had let their guards down, the chemistry that existed between them even when they were not performing for anyone. The director recognized immediately that what they had caught was irreplaceable and made sure it found its way into the final cut. These two scenes alone represent something profound about filmmaking and about human connection. Sometimes the most authentic moments are the ones nobody planned for. There is a reason Patrick Swayze's performance in Dirty Dancing still commands such awe, and it has everything to do with what the film demanded of him physically, and what he was quietly enduring throughout every single day of filming. Before we even get to the shooting conditions, we need to talk about Patrick's knee. Long before Dirty Dancing, long before Hollywood, Patrick had sustained serious damage to his left knee during his years as a high school football player in Texas. The injury was significant enough that when he later transitioned to a career in dance, it was a constant, grinding presence, sometimes manageable, sometimes agonizing, but never gone. He trained through it, performed through it, and built an extraordinary career despite it. But the situation had become even more serious at one point during his early dance career. At just 24 years old, a tooth abscess led to a severe staph infection that entered his bloodstream and settled directly in his already damaged leg. Doctors told him plainly that if the infection was not treated urgently and effectively, amputation was a real possibility. He survived, he recovered, but the leg was never the same. By the time he was filming Dirty Dancing a decade later, the cartilage in his knee was almost entirely gone. Bone was grinding directly against bone with every movement. Every dance sequence, every lift, every step was being performed by a man in genuine, significant pain. His resume at the time of casting had even included a note stating, "No dancing," because of his condition, which makes it all the more extraordinary that he ended up anchoring a film built almost entirely around dance. The lake scene brought its own particular agony. Jennifer Grey may have been slender, but Patrick explained that lifting someone in water transforms even the lightest person into what feels like an enormous weight, because the water creates resistance against every movement. With his compromised knee bearing all of that force, the famous lift was not the triumphant, effortless moment it appears on screen. It was an act of sheer will and professional discipline. The balancing scenes on the log were even more damaging. Patrick fell repeatedly. Each fall meant impact on the knee. The swelling became so severe that fluid had to be physically drained from the joint more than once during the production. He did not complain publicly. He did not ask for the choreography to be modified. He simply endured and delivered, day after day, for 43 grueling days of filming. And then there were the temperature conditions, which affected the entire cast and crew. The film was shot in autumn, but the story was set in summer, which created an immediate and persistent logistical problem. The production team spray-painted grass and leaves green to maintain the visual illusion of warm weather. But no amount of spray paint could change the temperature of the lake. The swimming scenes were filmed in October, in water that had dropped to around 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Jennifer Grey later described the experience as horrific. Patrick, in his autobiography, used the word hypothermically, as in, the conditions were cold enough to induce hypothermia. And yet they filmed the scene over and over until they had what they needed. During indoor shooting, the situation was reversed entirely. Camera and lighting equipment pushed the internal temperature of the shooting spaces to as high as 120 degrees Fahrenheit. On one particularly extreme day, 10 people, crew members and cast alike, fainted within a span of just 25 minutes. Veteran actress Paula Truman, who played one of the resort guests, collapsed and was rushed to the emergency room suffering from severe dehydration. This was the environment in which a supposedly joyful, sun-soaked summer romance was being filmed. The contrast between what appeared on screen and what was actually happening behind the camera could not have been more dramatic. If the physical ordeal of making Dirty Dancing was one kind of miracle, the film's journey from completion to release was another. The script had been rejected 43 times before a small studio called Vestron agreed to take a chance on it. Even then, Vestron was not exactly brimming with confidence. The studio's primary business was in home video distribution, and the initial plan was to release the film in theaters for a single weekend before moving it directly to the home video market where Vestron felt more comfortable. That was the extent of their ambition for it. When the first rough cut was screened for producer Aaron Russo, his response was devastating. He told the filmmakers directly that they should burn the negative and collect the insurance. Not re-edit it. Not go back and reshoot key scenes. Burn it. The story goes that Vestron executives were deeply anxious about the final product after those early screenings, worried that the film simply would not connect with audiences. A planned marketing partnership with the skincare brand Clearasil fell apart entirely when the company objected to the film's subplot involving an illegal abortion. The filmmakers refused to remove it, Bergstein had been adamant from the beginning that the storyline was integral to the film's authenticity and emotional truth, and Clearasil walked away. This left the studio scrambling to handle promotion without one of its key partners. Test screenings brought their own alarming data. Nearly 40% of viewers who watched early cuts of the film did not even register that abortion was part of the storyline at all. Given that it was woven into the plot as a significant dramatic element, this suggested that something in the editing or pacing was not communicating the story clearly enough.